Alright, time to get working on this tier list. Joe? Donald? You guys play Monster Hunter now?
Of course I do, Barack. You think I'd miss out on something this cool? Not in a million loans.
You know, it's news to me that I play this game, but my secretary told me that I should join in on the meeting, so here we are.
Are you seriously telling me that you don't even know what Monster Hunter is?
Yes, I do. I just didn't know it was called that until about 5 minutes ago.
Moving on, we have 14 weapons to get through, and they are not going to rank themselves. Starting out with the classic greatsword, I motion that we put it in S tier.
You know, Barack, I'm really quite pleasantly surprised by that motion. I think this is the first time I'm agreeing with you since that time we figured out how to take down Alatreon in 2020.
Yeah, well, I don't think S tier for greatsword should be too surprising, really. Joe?
Well, it's a big sword, and that's pretty cool. Most of the players who use it are pretty decent help in the hunt, and it's been iconic for as long as I can remember, I think.
Joe, I'd usually tell you to doubt your memory, but this time it's flawless. S tier for greatsword.
Well, with the big one out of the way, I guess it's time to decide what to do with longsword.
C tier for longsword. I used to think it was cool because it gave me the exaggerated swagger of an anime protagonist, but I have been tripped by longsword players far too many times to give it mercy.
Longsword does get a pretty bad rap for that, but it really is a good weapon with a very solid playstyle, all things considered.
One thing that I just don't understand about that thing is how everybody who gets good at it never gets hit. Seems kind of broken to me, and that's no fun for anybody.
That's true, but recently they've really tried to make it more balanced, and you can't tell me that the different spirit moves aren't the coolest things and sliced bread.
You know, that reminds me of the first time I saw sliced bread.
We don't have time for another one of your stories, Joe.
Well, how about A tier for longsword then? Otherwise, the story's coming out.
Fine, A tier for the stumbling stick, as long as you don't tell any more stories. All right, it's time for the light bowgun. I propose B tier, and that is my final answer.
Well, what makes you say that, Donald?
There's nothing that makes it particularly memorable to me for good or for bad, so it belongs squarely in the middle.
I actually quite like the light bowgun. It's a weapon that I can use without having to memorize and use the Da Vinci Code just to do what I want to do.
Well, that's fine, Joe, but I really think that the light bowgun is a little too reminiscent of certain things that I really think shouldn't be publicly available.
My goodness, Barack, this isn't a political debate. No one in the history of ever has been killed by a light bowgun because it's from a make-believe video game. B tier it is.
What if I wanted to put it in S tier?
We already don't have time for that. We're going with B tier, I guess.
Well, what about the heavy bowgun?
The heavy bowgun is just the cooler one. The ammo types are way more interesting, and who doesn't want to just go full auto on the nearest Rathalos like a Hollywood action hero?
I'll admit, this one is a little more fantastical, so it doesn't correlate as much to real life. I can give it A tier.
I'd really like a bowgun in S tier, guys. I think they deserve that.
We can't just go around giving awards just because we want to, Joe. The weapon has to merit its accolade. Why should it be S tier?
Well, I don't really have a reason other than I like it, I guess.
A tier it is. Moving on.
How about we rank sword and shield next?
Sounds good to me. I'd put sword and shield solidly in A tier. This weapon's been around since the very beginning and provides an excellent experience to new players, while also being satisfying and rewarding as the player increases in skill and capability as a hunter.
You know, Barack, I'd take it up a notch and put sword and shield in S tier. The Iceborne updated Onward really made this weapon a standout with the perfect rush combo. That really transforms the weapon from something that was just all around good to something amazing.
You know, I can't always remember how to get to the perfect rush, but when I do, it's generally pretty fantastic. Plus, on the days when I don't remember how, I can still use the weapon and get by just fine.
Incredible. Even on his sleepy days, Sleepy Joe can use this weapon and have fun.
All right then, I can't really argue with that. S tier for sword and shield.
Moving on to the dual blades, let's slap these boys into C tier.
C tier? That's pretty aggressive treatment, don't you think?
Oh, come on, Barack. Most of the players that use the dual blades don't even know what the combos are. They just spam demon mode and hope for the best. It's a brain-dead weapon and more the chief than whatever Biden did to win 2020.
Oh, please, Donald, don't cover up your presidential skill issue with that. I remember we dropped into a hunt together in 2020 and you were using dual blades. You couldn't figure out how to use them and rage quit halfway through Alatreo.
Donald, do you have something to share?
That is an absolute lie. Joe, your dementia is flaring up again, and I'm really not in the mood to deal with it.
Guess that makes me the deciding vote here. I'll be honest, the dual blades have never really been a standout weapon for me either. They're fine, but with the overall quality of Monster Hunter weapons, I feel like C tier is fair.
All right, for the next ranking, I'm putting Charge Blade in A tier. No objections allowed.
Objection. Charge Blade cannot be A tier because it's not accessible to the general public.
What do you mean by that, Joe? It's clearly available to everyone in every game that it's been in.
Come on, Sleepy Joe, it's not that hard to change your equipped weapon.
That's not what I mean, guys. I mean, my wife is a doctor and she can't even figure this thing out. It looks really cool, and when someone who knows what they're doing gets into my hunts with it, it's awesome. But it seriously takes as much time as a PhD to get to that point.
You've got a point there, Joe. None of my kids ever wanted to play Charge Blade because of the skill curve.
Oh, who has a skill issue now, huh? All those weekends at Mar-a-Lago were really just Charge Blade practice sessions, I'll have you know.
You're proving our point now, Donald. One shouldn't have to take entire weekends off just to learn a weapon. I mean, come on, in Iceborne, players had 3 different charge gauges to manage between the sealed, sword, and savage axe mode. It's just too much for most players. B tier.
Fine, but I don't want to hear any more accusations that I have a skill issue.
That brings us to the Charge Blade's cousin, the Switch Axe.
I'd put the Switch Axe in A tier. It's just as cool as the Charge Blade, but way more playable for the average player.
More like the average Joe, Sleepy Joe specifically. Anyways, I actually agree with him here. Switch Axe is another all-around great weapon. It does great damage and has great positioning moves for aggressive players. Its moveset just keeps getting better and better too.
I also quite like the Switch Axe. Solidly top of A tier.
For the first time that I can remember, we all actually agree.
Don't get too excited, Joe. I remember us agreeing just a few minutes ago. When were you last checked for dementia?
That's enough, Donald. Like it or not, we're a team. At least until this video is finished.
Video? Who's recording me without my permission?
I mean, what? I don't know what I just said. Weird.
How about we just move on with the Gunlance? This is too multiplanar for me.
Sounds good. You know, I've always liked the Gunlance personally. Reminds me of a big artillery cannon, and you can't go wrong with that.
I like it too, even though when I play weapons with shields, I usually faint because I don't time my guards right.
Well, even though Gunlance is cool and all, it's never been too standout of a weapon. It's fine, but I think it's a firm B tier.
Well, to be honest, I think that's pretty fair. The Gunlance is cool, but it's definitely outshined by some of the weapons that we've ranked higher.
That brings us to the Lance. I'd really like to give this guy something good, but I really just can't. To me, it just feels really slow for what you get.
Are we thinking D tier for Lance, then?
Absolutely not. No weapon in Monster Hunter deserves D tier. They're all at least C for cool.
You know, Sleepy Joe, you do have that one right.
I'm in agreement on that one. I would say that any weapon has the potential to be S tier in the right hands. These are just our opinions.
Speaking of weapons that are S tier in the right hands, let's talk about the bow.
The bow is a real powerhouse with the right build and skills, but I feel like its ease of play masks that to a lot of players that pick it up, and it's rarely mastered, though commonly used. I vote B tier.
I'm going to disagree on this one, boys. The sensation of becoming a Legolas while taking down big monsters is at least A tier.
But that's just the thing, Donald. Very few bow players actually achieve peak Legolas.
Well, I say it's time to make bow great again.
You can get back to us on that one once the campaign is organized, Donald. For now, we have a schedule to keep.
You know, the insect glaive is a pretty interesting weapon. I'm not sure where to put it. The concept is really cool and unique.
I have to agree with you there, Joe. The idea of controlling a giant insect to activate your moveset is a pretty awesome concept.
Yeah, unfortunately, the only one of the Kinsect activated moves that basically anyone actually uses is the helicopter mode. For that, B tier.
Hate to say it, Donald, but you're right. I myself have fallen into the helicopter mode trap far too many times.
And having done so, how do you feel, Joe?
I feel like I missed out on being able to take advantage of the really cool and unique moveset of the glaive.
Wow, Joe, I'm impressed. You can remember your own feelings.
You know what, man? You're lucky there's only 2 weapons left because my patience is getting really thin.
That's fine. I can just wait 5 minutes and you'll forget you're upset again.
All right, this one goes out to all our underappreciated duders out there. The hunting horn.
Well, a lot of people sleep on this weapon because it has a pretty slow moveset and its damage isn't quite as naturally high as the other weapons, but I've had hunting horn players really change up my hunts for the better.
You know, I always respect a duder. When one joins the quest, I always celebrate because I know he's going to help in one way or another. That cannot be said for all the weapons.
I think that means we can put the Doot Smacker into high B tier.
Yeah, to all our duders out there, keep it up. We love you guys.
Last, but certainly not least, we have the hammer.
Well, for all its reputation of creating Unga Bunga players, the hammer is actually really quite good for helping a player get good at positioning and timing their attacks.
Plus, that KO stun power is just golden. A good hammer player, or even a lobby of them, can really speed up a hunt just by keeping the monster constantly knocked down.
I do love a good hammer hunt myself. This is another weapon where the moveset just keeps getting improved too.
Well, is it stand out enough for S tier?
I'd say that it belongs in high A tier. It's not quite goated enough to be S tier, but dang is it good.
Finally, now I can get off this call and go back to playing.
Man, am I glad that guy's gone or what? See ya, Barack.
Okay, take care.